on my YouTube channel. Godical Alchemist, my YouTube channel. We have in 2019, when I started going public with everything, I started Friday night lectures. Godical Alchemist, Friday night lectures. Every Friday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we got into different topics regarding the aspects of the shadow work process, actual understanding the importance of healing, understanding the importance of going through the healing process, understanding that process of actually cultivating ourselves and allowing that gradual shifting. And took a little break from that because I got deeper dealing with working with my clients and breaking on things like that. So then I was like, okay, cool. So when I came back on the TikTok, I wanted to come to TikTok and bring that same flow here to TikTok. I wanted to bring that same flow here to TikTok. So welcome. We are going to be getting into Friday night shadow sessions. Every Friday night, 8 p.m. We're going to discuss these certain topics. We're going to discuss these topics that making these things normal. One of the things that I've come to understand and come to notice in my healing process, in me fully taking into my purpose, fully stepping into my purpose, fully understanding myself in the aspects of my purpose, doing this internal work, understanding the importance of shadow work, coming overall into the aspects of spirituality, is a lot of times we come into this space with a predisposition. We come into our process. We come into we want to create these new states of being. We want to create this new state of ourselves. But we're coming in and it's always based in, we take on this predisposition. We carry on the same attitude. A lot of times especially when we come into the aspects of we think about the aspects of the trauma. We think about the trauma. The traumatic event. Even into the aspects of understanding that a traumatic event is simply defined as anything that stopped or hindered or removed the ability. Let the music play. Anything that stopped us from being able to regulate or assess that emotional space. So the best way for me to explain it, one simple way for me to explain it is, in the title of this one that we're getting into, is the difference between staying in that predestination process. That means the events that happen to us, the things that happen to you, the standard that was set, or usually a lot of times when we're trying to step into doing something new, coming into that newness, coming into that true aspect of the process to become authentic with ourselves. A lot of times we don't understand that has to be built out. That has to be built out. Understanding aspects of your purpose. A lot of times, a lot of my clients, they'll come to me and they'll be like, but I don't know what my purpose is. But there's actually steps to it. A lot of times because of trauma, I remember because of my earlier going through my traumas, in that simple fact, going through my traumas, I had this predestined scope. Because of everything that happened, because of the way I was raised, because of all of these things that came up inside of that space, because of all these things that happened, I developed this predisposition or this attitude that was in reaction to the things that have happened. So, best way to give the example for everybody that's new to come in. Before this point, I thought like going with that original aspects of self, I thought I was supposed to go stay. I was working in restaurants at the time. So I was like, okay, cool. The highest point for me was to become a manager, have kids, and be the best father ever and be inside of these aspects. But I noticed every time I was inside of these spaces, as I started really taking accountability in the healing process, I noticed something. I noticed that a lot of the things that I was doing were always in predisposition to how I came up. It was always in predisposition to how I came up. The attitude that I maintained, the attitude that I sustained, the status, the standards that I maintained, the structuring of my life. It was all based on to what I thought was moralism, my morals. It was nothing more than that's traditionalism, or this state of being inside of your space. Think about being inside of the space, and you're simply doing things simply because it's always been done. It's always been done that way in the family. We've always done it this way. This has always happened. And you develop yourself into that thought process, and you become locked in that process. So now this is the predestination. This is the living in a state of multiple distractions. This is living in that state where you're still, for use an example. I remember the first time I sat in my seat of my purpose as being a therapist, coming in, being a spiritual therapist, being a cult psychologist, being in this state, being an actual healer and going through that process. And I remember the first time I was like telling some of my earlier family members, they were like, black people don't go to therapy. So that stuck with me. That was one of those things, okay, in that predisposition process, I would sit there in that thought. I was like, you know what? I'm going to prove myself to be the best therapist ever. I'm going to prove myself to be inside of this position. So naturally, since I'm trying to prove myself to be inside of this position, I'm stuck in the state of competing and comparison. I'm stuck in the space of competing and comparison. So since I'm stuck in this space of competing and comparison, when I'm now developing my standards, all of my standards are in comparison to something else. Nothing. So everything I'm doing is everything I'm now bringing into my space, it has to be something to be compared to. See, the biggest thing when we're thinking about coming into the aspects of the purpose, and we're going to go through these. I have 3 main points we're going to get into. The aspects of the importance of building out the standard, building out your structure, maintaining the stability, the importance of it when you're setting your intentions. We're going to get into the aspects of the difference between you contrasting and stuck in a state of comparison, meaning every time you're doing something, you're doing it from this angle of, I've developed this based on my old moral compass, but it was based on traditionalism. So thinking about the support systems, the difference between trauma bonding, even understanding the shifts that you come into. Because a lot of times we don't understand these shifts that we come into. Everybody, I'll use an example as we're jumping around. Wait for it as we're filling up. Think about it like this. Right now, I guarantee on your TikTok feed, your Facebook feed, Instagram feed, your Snapchat feed, whatever social media feed, somebody right now is talking about there's a great shift. There's a great shift happening right now. Somebody is saying there's a great shift happening right now. There's a shift happening. Think about that. Think about that. But think about the aspects of that shift. Think about the aspects of that shift. Where are you at in the point of that shift? Where are you at in the shift? Where are you at in the shift? Are you going through a point of assessment? Are you in the assessing state of the shift? That means everything's coming up. Everything seems to be falling away. What's left after everything falls away? Or are you in the structuring aspects of the shift? That means you set your standards, you assess your standards, you acknowledge your standards, you assess your standards, you've apologized and set the decrees of the reasons for your standards. That means you sitting there inside of that space, and that conversation that you usually don't have with your parents or loved ones or friends or family, you've removed that title. We're going to get into that tonight. You remove that aspect of that title. So now you're looking at them as this person is this entity, this energy, this person has their own set of behaviors, they have their own transitions, own points for themselves. This is magic. This is actually a special blend of herbs that's on my website. That's a special blend of herbs that are on my website. But sitting in that space, what part of the shift are you in? Are you ahead of your shift, or where are you at inside of your shift? These are the types of things that when we're actually doing this internal work, when we're coming in doing this, when you start doing your internal work, especially the importance of tapping into doing this work with your shadow work, these become important conversations that you need to start having. I'll ask the question. Here's a simple question. How do I know that am inside of my purpose if I've not went through the healing process? Simple question. One of the most simple questions that I had to ask. One of the most simple questions that I had to ask myself. One of the most simple questions to ask yourself, but you never really think about. Understand it. Until then, I didn't understand it. I was like, I don't know where I'm at. I'm trying to keep everything going. I'm trying to keep everything going the same way. I don't want nothing. I want to change. I want to embrace change. I want to embrace the impacts of change. I want to go through these aspects of my growth, but I don't know where I'm at. I'm in this state of this fear. I'm in this state of what state am I in? I'm in this fear-based state. I'm trying to see love, but I don't understand the simplicity of understanding that the way that everything from the way, even in the old balance of the way that I saw love has to be questioned. Was it love that I saw, or was it actually sitting in a oh craziest part, Booker T is one of my favorite. Booker T was one of my favorite damn wrestlers. But as we're sitting inside of that space with yourself and you're learning the aspects of yourself, you have to go through this process of eventually you're going to come into that space of what is your purpose? What is your purpose? If I don't understand what my purpose is, the first thing that I have to understand is how do I come into the aspects of my purpose? How do I step into the aspects of my purpose? The first thing becomes the state of understanding the importance of setting my intentions. See, the earlier intentions that we usually get into when we come into our spirituality. You come into your spiritual presence, you setting intentions, but you don't understand there's an actual process. We set intentions the same way, similar to how you remember praying in church. I state what I want and I just let it go. But there's a process. What stage of your intent? What stage are you in? This is what I mean by what stage are you in. Your first set of intentions are going to be set in my standard. My standard. My first set of intentions that I set before I step into any new state of my new process. When I'm going through a new process, I'm going through a new shift, I'm going through a new change. I'm going through that new change. You feel what I'm saying? Going through that aspect. Now that I'm sitting in that space, the most important thing that I have to look at is, okay, cool, I got to assess my standards depending on where I want to be. The simplest way of setting an intention is the version of yourself that you see in that space. That means if you are you're trying to everything from get the new job, the new house, the new site, the new status of relationship, the new relationship, cultivating whatever you're trying to cultivate and manifest into your space, it requires standards. What is that version of you that you are is needing to become, what are their standards? Because think about something simple like this. You're thinking about getting a new house. You want to own your own home. You want to own that car. You want to be at that job, or whatever it may be inside of that space. The person that owns that house, the version of you that owns that house is an owner. Right now, you are a renter, or you living with somebody, you living with people, or you hopping from house to house. So the version of you that's the owner of that house, what is their standard? What is their standard? What is their standard of study? What is their standard of learning? What's their standard in applying? Are they waking up? Are if you're still waking up, if you're still waking up at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and the version of you is getting up earlier, what time are they getting up? They getting up at 4 or 5, they getting up 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning? What are they doing at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning? What's their standard? How is their standard set up? What are they doing at 5 o'clock in the morning? Are they going for a run? Are they doing push-ups? Are they doing crunches? Are they working out? Are they doing calisthenics? They're going to the gym. They're meditating. What are they doing? So first thing you got to set is the standards for that. Acknowledging the standards that you need, acknowledging those standards for that space. You got to acknowledge the standards. So then those are my intentions. My intentions are set to evaluate, assess, acknowledge, accept, evaluate, apologize to myself. I need to apologize to myself for not knowing what I'm knowing now, and we're about to take this on. And then setting that new tone of the standards to that. So let's say that version of you that's inside of the house, for example, that version of you that's trying to get that new house. They've answered the question, why? They've answered the question, why? The version of you that's trying to get that new crib, they answered the question, why? They answered the why. They answered the why. See, the version of you in this current state with yourself, trying to go for the things that you're trying to go for, they haven't answered that. They haven't answered that why yet. They haven't answered the why. Simple. They haven't answered the why yet. They haven't answered the why. They haven't answered the why. See, a lot of times when we're going into these spaces, you're trying to manifest things into your life. You're trying to manifest this life. You're trying to bring these things into your life. You haven't answered that why yet. You have not answered that why. You haven't answered that why. Why are you trying? Like, I'll use an example. I remember the first time when I was like, okay, cool. The reason this is so important to answer the why. Before I give said example, the reason it's so important to answer that why. Reason it's so important is because it's going to set the tone in where you're at with yourself. It's going to set the tone of where you are at, where you are really at with yourself. Because a lot of times you're trying to acquire these new things, but that version of yourself that's needed to require to get the new things, you're not at that space yet. You haven't done the work that person's doing. So now this is an example. Now your whole space is populated to that thought process. So now you going up and down your timeline. You didn't went on Google. You're on Google. You're on your timeline. You're on Facebook. You're on Instagram. You're on TikTok. And now all of a sudden you got 50 different things across your page on Facebook telling you about therapy, self-healing, taking accountability, studying, assessment. You got everything. And then you got stuff, let's say you're going for that house. You got everything in the aspects of flipping houses and loans and all of this stuff. Similar to whatever you punching in. Your standard that you're setting up automatically brings in the state of your structure. And now it's bringing in the state of what you need to structure. See, you have to start with your standard. What's my standard? What's my why? What is my reason for doing this? What is my reason for doing this? See, the aspect of why this happened, when we go through that process, predestination always kicks in. The state of predestination is always in competition and in comparison. So something as simple as, I want to get a house because, go back to your childhood, we never had a house before. Or I should have a house because my cousin just got a house, this family member just got this, they got this, this, and this. So now you set your tone. Now that your tone is set based on predestination, the moment that you don't get the house that you want or what you need to acquire the house, now you upset. Now you go right back to square one. Everything starts to fall apart. Or even when you start getting into the space of when that manifestation starts coming into focus, because it's not triggering you. You're not used to the triggers that are coming up, that insecurity, that doubt, that guilt. Maybe I don't deserve this. Maybe I don't deserve to get that house that I wanted. I know my credit's messed. But then you'll think about all of the emotional aspects, but you don't think about the actual aspects of things that are coming up. You tell yourself, yo, I know I want to get this house, and I know I need to work on my credit. I know I need to work on my credit. My credit is not the best. So I need to work on my credit. At my job, the hours at my job are kind of slow. Things of that nature. You start thinking about things of that nature. But what do you do with that information? Those are the questions. Those are the answers to that, why you want to get that house. But beyond that point, you got to get out of it. We got to get out of that comparison state and looking at where I'm at now. Am I doing the things that are in alignment with me being a homeowner? Am I doing the things that are in alignment with me being a homeowner? Am I doing the things that are in alignment with me being inside of that said relationship? Am I doing the things in my current space? Am I present? Or am I still thinking on it based on my past? One of the biggest things that I go through in the aspects of, are you understanding when you're getting triggered? Every trick, when you get triggered, is letting you know where you are not being present. Almost every time that you get triggered and it makes you feel an emotional reaction, is letting you know where you have not been present. The version of you that you thought that you were is now going to be in question. So your whole structure that you have, this whole structuring that you developed is now in question. Where did I learn? Now we get into the questions of, if my standard was developed based on my trauma, my traumatic experiences, that means my structure must be offset to feed my traumatic experiences. That means my stability is an offset to form and to maintain my structure in my standard. So now that's that cycle. So a lot of times when we're sitting inside of that space without going through this healing process, that's also fucking important. You need to go through the healing. We have to go through the actual healing process. It's predestination. Because one of the biggest things that comes up with a lot of my clients is when we start talking about emotional intelligence and first understanding what their actual emotional age is. See, I remember I didn't understand, like, what is your emotional age? Your emotional age is the age that it could be the first or one of the many emotional points in your life of the traumatic experience that where you got locked in at. So let's say something happened to you when you were like at the age of 8. At the age of 7, your father left. At the age of 7, there was an argument and your father left. Or at the age of 7, your mother left. Or something happened dramatically inside of that space. You were unable, because of traumatic experience, I'm going to say that again, but say it throughout the live. That traumatic experience is only based on the inability to assess, acknowledge, accept, and learn those emotional point. So a lot of times when you're sitting there still getting upset, you ever thought about when you get really, really mad and you start acting really, someone that says you sound real, real childish and things of that nature? Listen to them. You're always going to get the information you need. Listen to them. How many times have you sat there and you pouted and you don't even realize that you're still triggering the 8-year-old self? Your 8-year-old self is being triggered. Every moment from the traumatic experience has been wired back to when you were 8 years old. So the first time that you learned disappointment, shame, grief, insecurity, one of these, go down that list of those emotions, the first time that you learn that, it's been streamed to that point. Why is this so important? I tell people all the time, why is this so important when it comes to actually setting intentions and setting your standards? Think about it like this. The things that you wanted when you were 8 years old, the way that you reacted to things, the way that you their emotional development, the way that you learned how to speak, all of these aspects of yourself from when you were 8 years old are still being in play. They're still in play. You haven't resolved what happened to you when you were 8. You just keep, every time that it comes up, you just keep chucking it to the side. Like, well, I'll get to that whenever I get the money, or I'll get to that when I get to this, or I'll get to that when I get to this. So now you're sitting inside of a space wondering why you're behind in the aspects of this cadence. It's because you're still living out the memory. You're still living out that memory from when you were 8 years old. The reason why you want a house now is the same reason you wanted a house back then. The same emotion, the same aspects of, ooh, I wanted a house. I wish that I had a house and a family and my parents were together and these things didn't happen and it wasn't my fault. And you go through this whole whirlwind of this emotional rawness. You're still acting that out. You're still acting out the 8-year-old program. So your standards are set to the tone of an 8-year-old. Your structure is set to the tone of an 8-year-old. Your stability is set to the tone of an 8-year-old. The 8-year-old emotional complex. You're now set to that emotional complex sitting inside of that state. So now every argument that you have, or you're wondering why your capacity is so, because think about this, going to this space. Your standard is based on building out your understanding of your capacity and your abilities. Your standard is based on your emotional intelligence, and your emotional capacity has to rise. If every time you go into if all you're doing, every time you get into an argument, you're always in a state of shutdown, where did you first learn to shut down from? If your immediate aspect of yourself, every time that somebody challenges your standards, is that you start to isolate yourself, where did you first learn that at? What point with yourself did you learn that from? The importance of learning that aspect is the only thing that's going to make you present, or you're going to continue to get triggered. You're going to continue to carry that predisposition that the world don't love you. You're going to continue carrying that predisposition from that point. And there's many points of those predispositions that I get into when I'm going to sessions with my clients. Think about that. Think about that predisposition that you set for yourself. The attitude that was based on the behaviors and the patterns. That's the key. If you don't remember, that's the milk. When you do not remember, it's not that, here's the key. It's not that you don't remember, It's just that you have not been introduced to a space in order to learn how to remove what is repressed. Think about you sitting there with think about there's memories that from everything that's active, and this is one of the things I teach my students and my clients. Think about it like this. Everything that is activated inside of your space needs 5 points. It needs those 5 points. Think about the pentagram. Think about those 5 points. It needs 5 points. 5 points. It needs the aspects of where it's going to be grounded or tethered, the aspects of the energy, whether the energy is in infatuation or it's actually in the aspects of it's a cultivating aspects of energy. So think about the aspects of memories. So myself, your soul, your ether, yourself is the 5th element. So if I have a memory that I don't remember, everything inside of my space naturally is going to try to trigger that memory. So think about it like this. If you've ever been in a lot of situations where it was always chaotic situations, every time you got close to you think about the moment we stick at a point where you remember something, or this feels hazy. I feel like I've been here before, or I've said something before. Something here feels familiar. How often do you sit with that? Do you understand how to sit with that? See, that's the point of this excellent when that question was asked. Think about it like this. If I ask you the question, what is therapy? If I ask you the question, 96 proof, if I ask you what is therapy to you? If I ask you the question, what is therapy to you? What is therapy to you? What is the aspects of therapy? If you asked me 4.5 years ago, yo, what's therapy? I'd be like, I don't want to talk to anybody about my problems. Even though I went to school for psychology, I understood therapy was not about that. Therapy is not the process. Therapy is you coming to me is not going to be sitting there. I'm going to tell you my problems. How do I fix them? That's not what therapy is. That is not therapy at all. That is emotional dumping. That's when we always think about old friends, family. That's what we keep doing in that narrative. Therapy is actually the process of the things that are repressed memories, suppressed memories, understanding the suppressed memories, the state of where I could going back and allowing myself to unravel these ball of these pathways that I've created, this neuro-linguistic programming, all the programs that I created, this ball of wires that is surrounded around my subconscious mind, and all of the dynamics that I've created to force myself not to remember, to repress this memory so far into the core that I don't want to remember it. And there's many different ways to actually step into it, whether it's we come to me for hypnotherapy, there's different levels to get into it. But understanding that important process of, oh my God, I don't remember the smell. Like, use an example. Whenever a thought's triggered, when I use the thought that's been triggered, I remember sitting inside of a space in one of my first or second meditations. Can't even remember, it's been so long. One of my first or second meditations, I wanted to have a conversation with one of I think it was my grandmother. It was shortly after my grandmother passed in 2005. I wanted to have a conversation with her. I didn't remember my grandmother. It had been so long. Like I had an idea what my grandmother was, but I didn't remember a lot of things that my grandmother had told me. And so I had to legit allow myself to start sitting in that space and asking those questions. I had to set my intentions around the standards of what my grandmother taught me, the structuring of what my grandmother gave me, the stability in what my grandmother gave me. And I had to remember all of the memories. There was some times that were not the very best of times, and there were times that were great. See, the aspect of repression of memory or putting it into our shadow, when you put that memory and you lock it into your shadow, you're like, I don't remember that. Think about how many times you said, I don't want to remember that. Or think about times when you be sitting in a space and you're like, I don't remember my past. It's there. It's just going to take some digging. Are you willing to go through the digging process? See, one of the biggest things when we come into the aspects of shifting from that predestination, that predestined thought process. My life is so bad, and I don't know why my life is so bad. Mm-hmm. Yes. Deja vu is a response. Deja vu can be a response to a suppressed emotion. Deja vu can be in earlier symptoms. It's an aspect of, think about it like this. Think about you having an alternate timeline in your life right now. Think about yourself in an alternate timeline right now. There's a version of you that's playing out the memory that's been suppressed. Every time that you come to a certain point in your current state with yourself, you come into that current state with yourself. You come into this current state of being with yourself. For example, that deja vu moment, is letting you know, like, wait, you crossed that path before. The key to working with a deja vu moment is allowing yourself to sit there, and not react. It's kind of like I'll use an analogy. If every time, let's say you're going for a run, say you were on your way to school. You're on your way running, or you're working. Let me start with a workout. Let's say you're going on your workout. You were running down this street, and one day there was a wreck on the corner. And the whole shit was shut the fuck down. You almost got hit by a car, but your dogs got out the way just in time, so you were safe. That created a memory point. That created a point. So now every time that you're gonna run down that same street, the first thing you're gonna do is look to your left to make sure there's no cars coming. So that's the muscle memory. You're looking to the left because something happened. You looking to the left because some shit happened. Oh shit, something happened here. That's the only reason I'm looking left and right. Now, with a deja vu moment, that moment's coming back up. It's the point of saying, wait, I've been here before. It's acknowledging the space. I've been here before. This feeling feels familiar. What do I remember about this moment? Let me look around and let me observe this space. The reason that you start observing the space is you're allowing yourself to go into the observer state. The coolest thing about when you come into deja vu moments, like for me, for example, I'm always having deja vu moments. I'm always thinking of the deja vu moments. But instead of me sitting there going, oh my God, my life is, I sit with it. I just allow it to play out. Because it's going to naturally bring itself up. Wait, I've had this moment before. Let me write down what I'm feeling right now. Am I feeling lost? Am I feeling in despair? Was I feeling happy? Did I feel sad? What feeling am I feeling? Let me write that down. If I'm driving, walking, if I got my phone, pull my phone out, type this in my notes. Let me go sit with this later. The more that you sit with it, the more that can now be uncovered. And now the deja vu moments are going to become more rapid. If let's say it's a suppressed emotion of guilt. Let's say it's a suppressed emotion of guilt. Go back to that same analogy. I went for the run and I didn't look to the left, or I had my headphones on. I wasn't paying attention. So I'm taking it as my fault because I ran without looking. But then if I sit back in that space and I allow myself to sit there, this is when I teach, when I do a hypnotherapy session, past life regression, and you look over, wait, I'm back in the space. I'm feeling it. I'm smelling the grass. I'm smelling the grass. Somebody rolled by and they were blazing. I'm smelling. I'm hearing the sounds. I'm sitting in that space. Wait, as I come up to this light, as I come up to this corner, this intersection, I did look over. The light was red. The light turned red. The guy that was in the car wasn't paying attention. The guy that was in the car wasn't paying attention. They were on their phone. They rolled through the light. Wait. So how I recorded this memory, and I took it on as my guilt, me not paying attention, it must have been my fault. Wait, why would I make that my fault when it wasn't my fault inside of that space, for example? So now I get to rewind that back. What am I linking this to? See, one of the most important points in uncovering an emotion is allowing myself to go back and feel the aspects of the feeling. See, a lot of times when we have a suppressed memory, it's the lack of the inability to re-tap back into that emotion. So that triggering moment, that's why I think about it like this. You'll trigger every breakup, every instance that's ever happened in your life. You'll trigger all that in the one moment. It's all going to be one moment. If I sit here and we sit here and go through a session, I can guarantee you all your griefs, every moment of guilt that you've ever had in the current state has been linked to one hub, is linked to one hub of grief, one hub of guilt. Or even getting deeper, you can be feeling guilt in the current state, but it links all the way back to an insecurity, a lack of something in the back of your past. So now I develop my entire standard around that moment. So if I don't remember the memory, if I don't remember the memory, I'm still going to act out that emotion. It's now this is a deeper state of staying inside of a predestination. You feel like you've been there before. You're going to places like you feel like you're going to places because you felt like you've been there before. You have this sense of it can be something as you have a sense of every time you go to the beach, you love the beach. You don't know why you love the beach. I've had clients that they don't understand why they used to love the beach. Go back to find out they don't remember much about their childhood, but the only memory that they have of their mother is when their mother took them to the beach one time. That's the only memory they have of their mother. But since they have when that traumatic event that took their mother away from them too early inside of that says my mother died when I was 7 or 8, that 8-year-old memory, they blocked it out. They blocked it out. They blocked it out. And as long as I have that blocked out, I can now move forward. This is how a lot of times how we've learned how to deal with emotions. This is a lot of times how we learned to deal with emotion. This is how a lot of times, not only just for men, but this is how a lot of times how we've learned how to deal with emotions. I just suppress it, put it to the side. I don't want to deal with it. I'm not going to deal with it right now. So when are you going to deal with it? Because all you're going to do where you're not willing to face yourself, you're going to create a responsibility. That's one of my favorite things to say. That was one of my favorite mantras. Where you're not willing, you're going to recreate a task or a responsibility. Where you're not willing to deal with where we're not willing to deal with that sexual trauma or the sexual abuse, you're going to develop a task or this aspect for yourself in order for it to play it out for you. So use an example. Let's say you went through a sexual trauma when you were younger. This is a safe space. This is a safe space. Let's say you went through a sexual trauma. Your standard, your predestined state. Now you set up this. Now you have a predisposition. The fear, the lack of protection, the lack of security, the lack of somebody believing you. But inside of that space, you develop the standard in order to compete with that trauma. So now you're competing with this trauma. So now you develop the standard that keeps you in a state of Stockholm syndrome. Because now you're in a state of Stockholm syndrome with that memory. So now this is where we come into the aspects of predestination is living in a state of hyper vigilance, hyper adolescence, that state of being that hyper state. There's a video on my YouTube channel that we got into that deep last week. But you stay in this hyper state. Now you're always stuck in the state of hyperactivity. So now all of your standards are based on a state of hyperactivity. Now your entire structuring of your life is based on staying in a state of hyperactivity. Now your stability is based on a state of hyperactivity. It's based on a state of hyperactivity. So let's think about that state of hyperactivity. So now if I'm sitting inside of a space and I'm now inside of a state of hyperactivity, say I went through that sexual trauma, going through a sexual trauma state. Now I'm going to hyperfixate. Staying in a state of anything, staying in that hyper state is staying in a state of hyperfixation. So if my standard is always stayed on hyperfixation, that means all of my standards are going to be externalized. Everything that I'm going to do needs to have it's going to have to have a certain tone of validation to my why. It's not answering my why as we opened up this live. It's not answering my why. It's giving me an equation to my why because it's externalized. So now I'm saying, I'm hypersex. I just got a lot of energy. I'm hypersexual. I got a high sex drive. Like we talk about men, tall sounds. We talk about we got a high sex drive. No, sir, you don't have a high sex drive. Having a high drive means you have a high sense of direction. Drive equates to direction. So if you have a high drive, that means you have a high sense of awareness to your direction. So if you don't have a high sense of direction, you don't have awareness to your direction and where you're leading yourself down most of the time, that means you don't have a high drive. You just have you've hypersexualized the state of yourself because when you were 8, 9, 10 years old and the first way you were introduced to sex or being accepted, you're blocking that out. You're suppressing that tone of that memory. I never want to be looked at as weak again. I never want to be looked at as weak again. I never want to look like I've been hurt. I never want to feel that feeling ever again. So if I'm able to make other people feel before I feel, I can live inside of the context. Oh, no, that's not me. Oh, no, that's not me. You don't understand me. So now you develop an entire standard that's based on something external, based on external validation. This is when we get into the state of you felt like you want to have 109 you hadn't had multiple partners, but now you're sitting there like no one understands you. Think about everything that you tethered to. You think about everything you tethered to. So now your structure is based on tethering to all these, keeping yourself tethered to these things so it keeps you away from your own emotional intelligence. So your stability is now, since my standard is based on validation, my structure is always going to be based on competing for validation. So now my entire stability is going to be based on maintaining the comparisons in my life, to keep myself compared to others in my life, so I can stay in this constant state of competition. So now my whole life I didn't spend in a state of competition. I'm not taking no time, because I don't want to sit with the information. I don't want to sit with myself. I'm taking all this time running away from these aspects of my emotions I'm running away from my emotions, not dealing with my emotions. I'm not working in the state of I'm not working with these. I'm not sitting in these states. What do you think that you're going to naturally create? What kind of space what kind of environment do you create when your whole life is based on validation? What kind of life do you think what kind of existence do you create? Are you creating anything? The worst thing about the aspects of staying in predestination is it's a constant state of emulation. You constantly need something to validate you. Every stage that you come into, every level that you come into, is only based on validation. So every time that you're having a conversation, you're listening to react. You're listening to use your intellectual wit. I'm this, I do this, we did this, I was this. You're never going to be present. Because when you step into the aspects of your purpose and you start building out your space, when we start building out our spaces and the aspects of our purpose, a lot of that shit has to be looked at first. See, the biggest thing about the healing process is actually sitting in that space. Where did I learn my predisposition? Where did I graft my predisposition from? And this is a lot of times when this comes up, is like, that's where a lot of the memories are repressed. That's where a lot of my memories are suppressed. A lot of my emotions are suppressed. A lot of my emotions are repressed. I don't like that feeling. I don't like that feeling. I don't like the way that makes me feel. What if I let you understand, sitting with me in a session, understanding, most of the times when you say you don't like a feeling, you're stuck within the context. You're stuck within the context. The last time that I felt that way, this happened. The last time that I thought I felt happy, this happened. So I stopped being happy. You're stuck within context. Your happiness is based on a context. Your happiness was based on a context. It wasn't based on an actual feeling. You don't know what that feels like. You don't know what that feels like. You don't know what happiness actually feels like. You don't know what happiness actually feels like. So guess what happened? The job became your happiness. The relationship became your happiness. The friendships became your happiness. Your first child became your happiness. The children became the happiness. Everything outside of you became your happiness. Here's the thing about anything being externalized outside of you that you're dependent upon. This is when we also develop codependency narratives. That you depend on anything outside of you to give you something that you have not yet given to yourself. If I'm not generating from a space of happiness with inside of myself, and I'm gonna break that down a little bit. One of the states. If I'm not generating from a space of happiness, then anything that I want to make me happy, mm-hmm. But here's the key. It's not even from a state of because I love that in an aspect. The thing you're telling, because remember, everything around you in nature, everything in nature naturally strives and it has no limit. The only thing or the only entity in this space that has a limitation, puts a limitation on itself, is the human aspect. Only in the human concept do we put a limit on ourselves. Will you only put a limitation on yourselves? If you go outside and you go look at a tree been growing in you go walk around your neighborhood and you go look at a tree. You go look at a tree. A tree only grows as high as it can grow, and it grows its roots as deep as it can go. Only it has no limit. So when we think about the aspects of developing that aspect of happiness, I love that came up. And the aspects of happiness, the first thing that I must understand and learn to develop is what state of being am I in? This is when we talk about the love state, the love-based state of self, the higher state of emotions, joy, empathy, enlightenment, compassion, peace, things of that nature. The lower states of the emotional dialogue are the fear-based state. Guilt, apathy, shame, things of that nature. Most of the times when we go through our environments, the reason why you came down to see your dip down in your environment was because most of the stuff you did was based on a fear-based state. That's why when we think about the human dialogue, when you felt happiness, it was really a state you were really emulating from a state of infatuation. Most of the times when I was happy, after the traumas happened, is you're going through a state of, you're in a state of infatuation. So you ride that wave of infatuation. The wave of fear is quick. It's a faster wave. The ebb and the flow of fear is fast. That means remember, think about what I said about that hyper state. It's stuck in a hyper state. It has no time for it to rest in between resting and rebuilding. So you sitting there going like this. That's the fear-based state. So you constantly need that stimulation. So the first time that you thought you felt happiness in the external sense, you're automatically stuck in that. This is the addiction complex. Now you're stuck looking for that feeling again. So now you got to look back at what I said. What was your standard that led to that structuring of what you thought was happiness? Think about it in the lower state. If my standard was based on guilt, then I go look at, for an example, let's say you have ask yourself a question in your standard. Do I know what my attachment style is? Is your attachment style anxious? You have an anxious attachment style? Think about if you have an anxious attachment style that you developed because your father left when he was earlier in life. Think about that. That means you're automatically always going to look for security. You're looking for security. So you're looking for security. Anything that makes you happy is supposed to make you secure. So now my standard, thank you. So my standard is only going to be developed around things that are keeping me in that infatuation of being happy. Now let's look at the television. This is where women, I've just now, over the last couple of times when I'm dealing with my clients, every time I look at TV, I'm always looking for shit to like stimulate my psychoanalyzing brain so I can like keep that move going on. And then you look inside of that space, all you doing inside of that space is you're now infatuated with happiness. So you're going to do anything to be happy. So where did you learn that from? Where did you learn it from? Let's go back to the relationship let's go back to the first relationship that you ever learned with it was either your mother or mother figure or foster figure, whatever figure it may have been. And let's say your mom, let's say you 5 years old. Let's say you 5 years old, you sitting in the living room, and all you hear in the background is arguing between your mom and your dad. All you hear is that argument between your mom and your dad in the background. And then every time that you show something, now your dad comes by, your mother comes by, and it's because they didn't understand what emotional intelligence was. So all you ever heard was your dad always telling your mom always telling your dad what he could have done, and your dad's always they're going back and forth. This is being programmed into your mind. It's being programmed into your mind. Gratitude. This is being programmed into your mind. Now you have developed from that 5-year-old state of development. Never. So now you sitting in that state with yourself. From the predestination, don't feel that way. Everybody. From that predestination, now that you have the standard set of what you heard that standard. So now you're looking for the structure to emulates that standard. Okay, I heard my dad say this to my moms all the time. So if I do these things and I can prove myself with these things, one of these things, then okay, cool. Now I can have my structure and my stability. Put together. You get what I'm saying? I can have my structure and stability put together. But this is the key. When we think about predestination, how you get stuck in that trauma loop. The way that you went in is the way that you got to keep going. That shit got to keep happening. That shit has to keep happening energetically. One of the things I teach in the classes, teach to my clients, is before anything can become mental, it must be set based in the tone of energetics. It must be done energetically. So if I'm energetically in a state of guilt with myself, that means any standard, any structure, any stability is going to be based upon guilt. So now everything that I go into, the dialogues that I'm going to hear, they have to trigger me to feel guilty. Here's the thing. You can hear something that's very fucking positive that you never even heard before, and it's going to make you feel guilty. You can hear something that is very fucking negative that can make you feel guilty. That doesn't make them good or bad. It's which way does it serve you. Think about that. Think about the relationship you had where you thought you had everything going right, but there's a difference between the process of how you came into that space. How did you come into that space? Did you come into that space actually based on learning, or did you come in there with the expectation? You came in there with an expectation. One thing that I've learned from myself, I have no expectations for no one around me. I have no expectations for anyone around me. I only have expectations of myself. As long as I'm inside of a state of developing my expectations and developing my aspects for myself, gratitude, and I have those expectations built with myself. You feel what I'm saying? As long as I'm building my expectations with myself, developing my standard, developing my structure, developing my stability in my healed state, becoming whole, everything that's going to align with me is going to bring me, everything that's going to be in alignment with me is going to be exactly where it needs to be at. If it's positive and it aligns with me, does it serve me? This is when you start asking the question. Instead of the copy and paste, I'm going to think positive. I made a video, it's on my live on the channel. Nah, that's not how that works. Nah, that's positive, but it doesn't serve me. See, in this negative space, this old memory that keeps coming up that I keep trying to push back down by thinking positive, that's what's needing that's what I need to serve me. That's what's serving me right now. I need to sit with that emotion. These people coming around me that I'm saying, the people that are coming around me inside of this state, sorry about that. The people that are coming around me in this state of being with myself that I think are all negative, they're all users, they're all manipulative, they're all cheaters, they're all betraying me. Instead of me sitting inside of that space and going like, oh my God, they're doing me dirty. I have to, when I am able to sit with myself, and if I don't know how to sit with myself, I need to get beside somebody that knows how to do that, sit with me in that space. How am I betraying myself? Maybe I'm not saying no enough. Maybe I'm not saying no enough. Maybe I'm not, maybe, why do I feel guilty when I'm saying no? Taking it accountability. Why am I sad? What am I not saying no enough? Why do I feel bad for saying no? Where did I learn to feel bad for saying no? But the key to that space, the key to understanding and shifting that space of a space where you feel like everybody is negative around you inside of that space, there's the version of you that you are inside of that space that you seem to keep attracting that in your life. That's what needs to be worked on. That's what needs to be worked on and dealt with. That's who needs to be. That's the person who needs to be sat down with. That's the person that needs to be sat down with. That's this when we come into the space of, okay, let me develop my new intentions. Let me set my new intentions. This when we set the standard in my intentions. Now I'll build an example. Let me build you an example in aspects of healing. I remember for a long period of time when I would go to my job, I'd be at my job, be around people, and everybody that I would be around was subpar. We'll say subpar. Subpar as hell. So like if I be at work, I'm the best person at my job. I'm the one everybody's dependent on. If I'm around family, I'm the only one everybody's dependent on. If I'm around friends, everybody's dependent upon me to make the moves. But I had to sit with myself. After burning myself out like 70-11 times, however the old folks say it, after so many times of burning myself out, I had to sit there and think for a second, like, wait, there's a pattern here. One of the many exercises I get in my clients is from this point right now. Use an example. Was okay. Let me take myself back a week. 7 days. Look at the point you are at right now. Take yourself back 7 days. I want you to assess everybody that's around you. This includes friends, family, girlfriend, boyfriends, whoever. Your first level of assessment is removing the titles. Your first level of assessment is removing the titles. The hardest thing for us to do in most times when we're doing our work is we do not remove the title. So a lot of times when you go into a space, the very thing that you need to sit there and work on, you won't face because you gave it a certain title. Like, use an example. Let's say you have some reserved issues with your mother. You're not going to deal with those issues with your mother because you gave her the title of mother. Until you call her by her name, call out her name. So you call out her name, call her by her name. You won't only see her as my mother should have did. Here's the list of things that my mother should have did for me. Here's the list of things that my mother should have did for me. So you won't look at you won't look at the example of, okay, but what did she do for me? Why? So now, once I look at what she did for me and what she was able to do or what she was doing or why, now I can look at the environment. So now let's look at the aspects of the pattern. So now I go back through my pattern of a week. You go back a week. You look at everything in a week. You're looking for the pattern. Now take that back a month. Are the same people, same places, same people, places, events, ideals keep going on? Take yourself back 3 months. Do the same assessment. Take yourself back 6 months. Another 3 months. That's 6 months. 6 months and 1 week. I take it back self another back 3 months. Now, as you're going back through this list, and you're doing this assessment, 3 things you're going to notice. There's a constant. We're going to start with the number 1 thing. The one thing you're going to notice that there's a constant. There's a constant. That constant is you. You're the constant inside of that space. You're the constant. What you think about that? You're the constant. Your reaction, or you living in a state of a response. Your reaction based on guilt, based on insecurity, based on the doubt, the feeling of disrespect, lets you understand that first thing I need to understand is I'm living and I'm acting in a fear-based state. I'm living and I'm acting in a fear-based state. So my idea of what respect is now has to be questioned. My standards on respect need to be questioned. If I'm living in a fear-based state, most of the time, we're going to give a general scope of it. My respect is going to be always based on what can be done for me, what was done and what wasn't done. That's respect in a fear-based condition based on what can be done and what was done. So now think about the first time you got in a fight and somebody actually protected, the person that protected you wasn't inside of your family, they protected you. So now you got respect for them because they're still in the same space. That leads to trust in the fear base. That trust in the fear base is only going to be based on proximity and complacency. Your trust is now based on proximity and complacency. That means as long as I can see it, I can trust it. As long as I can hear it. If I didn't hear it, if I hear it, I can trust it. And complacency, as long as it doesn't make me act outside of myself, I can trust it. As long as it keeps me acting in the same space. So now that creates the state of loyalty. So now your loyalty is now based on complacency. Now your loyalty is only based on complacency. So now everything you're doing based on loyalty is only based on complacency. They understand me more than anybody. We've been through the same thing. Congratulations. Now you're sitting inside of a space. Guess what you learned? You're learning that you've been trauma bonded. Don't get upset. Get mad. I will never tell a client to get mad, don't get upset, don't get mad, don't feel some type of way. Don't let the emotion come to the surface. I'll let you have for most of my sessions when I'm working with a client, the first 5 to 10 minutes, I allow you to just release. I allow you just to release. Yell, scream, holler, do everything you need to do. But I'm going to pause you. I'm going to pause you. All right, pause. Look in my eyes. I want you to take 5 deep breaths or 10 deep breaths. However many breaths the Spirit say drop. I want you to do 5 deep breaths for me. Follow with me. Taking a deep breath. Taking that deep breath. Hold it. Count back to 10. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, cool. Release. Taking another deep breath. We go through that cycle until you've been through 5 deep breaths. On the last breath, I tell you to focus on the emotion that's coming up the hardest. What you feel, what you hear, the noise, everything that's coming up the hardest. I want you to sit with that emotion. Sit with it. Okay, cool. Now, how do you feel? Let's express that feeling. Let's talk about that. Let's isolate this feeling. Let's isolate this synapses, that pathway, and let's isolate it, and let's work on this. This is all we're going to work on inside of this space. This is all we're going to work on is this axiom, these 2 points. In between these 2 points is me and you having a conversation. That's all we're going to work on right here today. That's all we're going to do right here today. That's what we're going to work on. That's all we're going to talk about and deal with. That is so important to have that conversation. That is so important to have that conversation. Because without that conversation, a lot of the times we just keep repeating the same thing over and over and over again. A lot of times when we're thinking about emotionally venting, a lot of times you just been sitting there emotionally dumping. Because your state of tradition, This when you got stuck in, I got morals versus I got, let me down. So you've been stuck in a state of comparison versus you've been stuck in a state of capitalize. So you don't know how to capitalize because you're stuck in a state of fear, respect, your trust, your trust, your loyalty is compromised. You can't capitalize on what is of necessity. You'll always find yourself capitalize on a state of compromising based on accessory. Think about those accessories. Think about the accessories. They love me based on this. They love me because they give me this. Your whole respect system is based on somebody giving you something or what you can give and what you can do for that person. So your love is only based on that. Well, if you love me, you'll do this. If you love me, you'll do this. And if you trust me, you'll do this. And if you were really loyal, you wouldn't do shit like that. So you have this whole state of being, you have this whole concept of moralism, but it's actually traditionalism. Your traditional scope of thought was always based on your mom was not loyal, your dad was not loyal to your pop, your dad wasn't loyal to the family. Your dad left, but you don't know the whole story. Your mom did this, somebody did this. Your whole system is based on what was done to you, the traumatic experience. So as long as I'm living inside of that traumatic experience, all I can do is emulate a tradition, a trauma-based tradition system to where it becomes things of, I'm doing this for the kids. You'll understand when you get grown, da 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 da. There's no unconditional. So now when we start going through the process, exactly everything. So now we go through the new process. Think about now we're going through the processing and the purpose of coming into the state of the love base. You got to understand, we got to be able to separate these two to be able to see what it is. So now when we come into that love base, respect becomes unconditional. See, in the love based state, respect is unconditional. Because my respect, regardless of how somebody can want to say whatever they want to me, say what they want, act a certain way, want to go hard and say some shit to me in that way in that space. My respect for myself, my acknowledgement of myself, me understanding the works that I'm doing for myself is not going to allow me to be sit and get stuck in a loop. Am I really feeling disrespected, or am I feeling a sense of, I feel this infatuation with masking my insecurity? Or is this, so now we get deeper, is this person projecting insecurity on me? How did I enter into that space for having that conversation with that person? This is when you start looking at people, most of your friends and family members, these relationships are based on trauma bonds. So the moment that you start actually changing and actually start doing your actual growth, now everybody wants to start acting funny because now you're moving in this different line of respect. Respect becomes unconditional in the love-based state. Let's get deeper. Since my respect is unconditional in the love-based state, my trust now elevates to capacity and ability. Then when you think about intuition, trust is based on capacity and ability. My trust in myself allows me to be able to respect this person, respect in the aspects of being unconditional, to accept this person at where they're at, respect how they're feeling, respect what they're going through. And before I engage, do I have the capacity and the ability, true capacity? Where's my level of capacity and my ability to sit within the side of this space? This is when we come into the learning aspect. A lot of times you go into spaces because you're used to high conflict situations. You think you got the ability because you think your ability of yelling is a top tier ability. It's a low tier ability. It's a fear-based ability. Because in the aspects of the higher state of ability for yourself, in the higher levels of trust, is the ability to de-escalate a situation. It's the capacity to be able to de-escalate a situation and the ability to understand and comprehend what I need to do to de-escalate this situation. Maybe, just maybe, the best thing for me to do in this situation is to walk away. Maybe the best thing for me to do is to actually step away, walk away from this situation. Because if I walk away, I increase the space. I can increase my space. Because think about it. When I'm stuck on proximity, I always got to be there. Well, that's my friend, and they getting in a fight, and that's their 6th fight this year, this month, with another guy, with another chick. That's their 6th fight. They always get in fights. They always arguing. They always fighting. Why? Because you're always there to come pick them up. Because you remember the fights when you were little. Just when we get back into our younger self, you remember the fights when you were little, and you wish that you could have stepped in and helped your mom. You wish you could have stepped in and helped your dad not push your brother through the coffee table and some shit. You're still acting from that point. So your emotional development state is the 5-year. Think about being a 5-year-old sitting in that state when I just want everything to be okay. I don't want it to be my fault anymore. So this allows us to now lead into the state when we come into the aspects of our loyalty. My loyalty is based on the prioritization of myself first. I must become my priority. I'm loyal to my standards. I'm loyal to how I create my structure. I'm loyal to how I create the stability for my structure. My trust is based on the capacity and the ability of the things that come into my space that are able to ultimately teach me, and aid me in the development of my space and developing me to have a stronger sense of unconditional respect. So now, as I start developing inside of these spaces, now I develop disciplines to sync with these spaces. This is the difference between you trying to hustle to get it and you coming into that state of alignment. See, when you're in a state of that hustle aspect, you're only going to do it till burnout. You're going to do it till the thrill is gone. You're going to do it till the next trend. You're only going to do it until yay, I got the man of my dreams, the woman of my dreams. I got this of my dreams. I can stop doing all this other shit. But when you sit in an aspect, that's predestination. That's predisposition. You came in with a certain attitude based on behaviors and patterns that you're waiting to be triggered off. As opposed to you coming into the aspects of your purpose, your true purpose with yourself, and you develop your standards around your purpose. Your purpose is limitless. Your purpose is limitless. Your purpose allows you to naturally assess, naturally acknowledge, naturally face conflict, naturally go through those healing processes, as opposed to your predestination is, well, I came from the streets, so that's how the streets are. So now your environment is based on that. Which leads to the deeper aspects of the structure. Let's get into the deeper aspects of the structure. You structure an entire environment based on your trauma. You structure an entire environment based on your trauma. An entire environment based on your trauma. Whole environment based on trauma. So now you're like, oh my God, my life is supposed to be this way, and this is supposed to happen, and this is supposed to go on like this, and this supposed to... You built your whole entire space off of trauma. What happened to you 6.5 months ago? What happened to you all those years ago? You still living it out. So now your standard is always going to be questioned. This is when we go into aspect. Think about your standards. Your standard is something that stands alone. When you're structured, when it's time, like think about when you leveling up. Let's go into the aspects of you leveling up. Your stability has to be challenged. Your structure has to be challenged. The only thing that's going to stand is your standard. That's why it's called a standard. Only thing that's going to stand up. Yes, including friends and all associations. All that shit's gonna your standard stands. Your standard stands without anything. If your standard is externalized, that's usually trauma. That's usually when we go into that state of your trauma response. I can't do this here. I can't. This is when you start limiting yourself inside of environments. You start limiting yourself. I don't do this because it's this, and I don't do this because it's this. So now you're only looking for things to a certain scope. I need everything to be this way in order for me to feel comfort. I'm now going to complacent. Now I'm stuck back in a state of complacency. I don't want to lose my credibility. Here goes the truth about having the stuff that you've done before you start your healing process. Everything that you're still trying to hold on to is time served. It's already been given what it needed to be given. It's already living inside of that space, populating that space. The longer that you stay around those associations with certain people, well, I knew this person since I was in the 3rd grade, and when we were in the 5th grade, there was a bully that pushed me. They were always there every time a bully was fighting with me. But if you go back to that memory of every time that they showed up to help you fight, and you go back to that memory, you start noticing like, wait, I noticed that every time something happened, they were there for the fight. They were always saying something to me to make me fight, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? So what were they really there for? Because here's the thing. Someone could have saved your life back when you were in the 5th grade. And since you have been stuck on the memory of them saving your life in the 5th grade, you never grew out of that cycle. So they never had to grow out of that cycle. Because you're holding them to that same space, and y'all still holding each other to that same bond and them same points. So as long as this pathway is open, they can keep coming into that space. They're the only ones that can test your standard. My standard sets my boundaries. My boundaries is my structure. My structure is my stability. Where my stability stands. This is what I mean by you have to take the title off of people. You got to take those titles away. The most important thing is taking away that title, because that's all that it was. It was a title. As long as you give them the title, you cannot redefine. You're not going to redefine it. That means everything that you're going to do is going to be based on that same title. I'm going to prove myself to be a better mother, better father, better friend. I've always been the best friend. Were you really the best friend? Were you always honest? When your friend needed information, when your friend needed to hear something in a real sense of self, how did you deliver it? Maybe I'm always the friend that's telling all my friends everything about themselves. Okay, that's cool. That's good. But were you delivering it in a way that was conducive to teaching? Or were you just simply dumping the way they were dumping? When you told your homegirl or your homeboy that, hey, you need time by yourself, did you honor that thought that you just gave them and gave them time to themselves? Or did you you feel what I'm saying? When you say, hey, you need to take some time to yourself and sit down with yourself and really, I'm going to check in on you tomorrow. I'm going to check in on you, but you really need to sit down with yourself. I only can suggest that you sit down with yourself. What did you do after that? In your standard, your structure, your stability, with your space, how are you in alignment? What are you in alignment with? What lesson did you need to learn? You got all your homegirls around you, they come to your house once a fucking week to emotionally dump. And you keep saying you ain't no therapist, but you ain't give them no links to no therapist. Hey, you need to go to you know what I'm gonna do? You know what I'm gonna do for you? I set you up with I set you up with a consultation with this therapist that I know. It's up to you if you take it. The space is open. You can go there. But for me right now, with the boundaries that I'm setting, I can't allow myself to continuously take in this energy, this negative energy, this energy that you're bringing in. This energy isn't serving me any good purpose. I'm losing sleep. I'm mad at work. I'm sitting here. I'm eating to feed your negative emotions. How deep are you really getting when you're creating that space of separation? Or are you still stuck on, well, I've known them ever since I was, that doesn't matter. Remember, you're taking priority in your own process. You got to take priority in your process. You got to take priority in your process. You developed an entire life where you didn't have to take priority in your process. Your standard always can be set by validation by others. Your whole entire structure was based on the validation of others. Your whole stability, your whole sense of stability was based on the value of others. Mm-hmm. You have to allow yourself to find and create spaces that are based on you being able to naturally expand and give that energy to yourself. Until I give it to myself, I cannot. Until I give it to myself, I can't give it to anybody else. That's a simple line that sounds really mystical. But the true indeed aspects of that process is, in order for me to give me what I've been giving myself to be in that state of abundance and overflow, is I have to create my standard, my structure, and my stability around that. That means I got to develop my disciplines around that. That means I got to allow, every time that I'm going through a process, use the simplest, one of the most simple examples. When you're going to the gym to go work out, you're not going to the gym to lose weight. You're not going to the gym to lose weight. You're not going to the gym to look good. Those are all surface levels. You're going to the gym to acquire a new set of skills and develop a new discipline. That changed the whole dynamic. Because if I'm going to the gym to lose weight, that means I'm going to do 30 push-ups and look at myself in the mirror for 15 minutes. Then I'm going to do another 30 push-ups and wonder why my body isn't changing. But if I'm going into the gym to acquire a new skill, I am more in focus with the standard of the skill that is being set. Maybe I can't do push-ups that good. Maybe I need the push-up assistant. Maybe I need the pull-up assistant. Maybe I need a trainer. Maybe I do need those things. Let me take an assessment of where my life is and see where I can make these necessary adjustments to get that trainer. Maybe I'm sitting here in what I'm calling, everybody's depending on me. Maybe I've developed this cycle. Maybe I've developed this space of, as long as everybody comes to me, I'm needed, I'm wanted, I'm valued. My worth is validated. But maybe I don't understand this. Maybe I need to go sit down with a therapist. Maybe I need to sit down and really sit down with a therapist or a coach or someone that's in the details that can do these aspects and actually help me understand how to develop my new standard. Not give me a new standard, help me develop my own standard and disciplines. See, when you shift from that external to that internal, and you now come into that new process, all that's going to change. All that the natural need for that change is needed to happen. But guess what's going to come up? What's everybody going to think if no one got to know you going to therapy? You come to me, if you book sessions and consultation with me, everything's confidential anyway. Any therapist is going to be confidential. See, the only thing you got to worry about, you talking about with your friends, you tell your friends your problems, you got to worry about bias. You got to worry about them telling somebody. Y'all worry about all that shit. You come to a therapist, we're bound by confidentiality. We're unbiased. We're not there to try to fix your problem. We're there to help you assess and learn how to elevate that shit. It's a difference. That introspection of that, it's time to sit down. But what if my life your life is going to fall apart anyway? That's the cycle. That's when we start talking about those shifts. What part of the shift are you in? You've been doing you do the same 3 things every time. You get the information, you romanticize about what it could look like, and then you start getting the accessories. You do the same 3 things. That same 3 points are the same points that you take into every relationship, friendship, job. You spend more time inside of that space saying, this ain't like, I'm so glad this ain't nothing like my last relationship. So you spend the first 4 weeks to 3 couple months constantly throwing out everything that didn't happen in the last relationship. And what are you doing inside of that? What do you think you're creating inside of that space? The room for that to repopulate. You created that. Oh yeah, it's gonna happen. I hate when it keeps happening to me. Everybody cheat. I'm tired of getting cheated on. How many times are you gonna cheat on yourself? You cheating on yourself. I'm tired of getting betrayed and getting used for my night. I'm tired of going through processes where I feel like I'm loving too hard. You can't love too hard. That is a trauma response. Loving so hard. I love so hard. I'm a ride or die. I do everything for everybody. Think about it like that. I want you to think about this. If you're sitting inside of a space and you stop doing all of the things that you're doing for everybody else, and you actually allow them the time to actually, for the because it's going to come up anyway, and you start going through your healing process. Everybody that you called your friend that was based on a trauma bond, and now you discover and develop the new sense of, okay, I'm raising my standards from trauma bonding. I'm raising my structure from trauma bonding. I'm raising my new stabilities from trauma bonding. What are these people that are around you? They go from friends to associates. They were associated with you only based on the trauma. You ain't got no mom. You just now developed a new dialogue with your mother that your friends are not dialogue on. So now inside of the space where since you didn't create the dialogue or started learning or accepting the aspects of your mother, you remove the title from Abigail. You remove the title of mother and call her. You've been calling your mom Abigail. She has her own list of things. So you open up that dialogue. Now when you go into that space where you were the mother of your people or the father of your people, now you are no longer that mother. You're no longer the externalized, accepted version of the mother of that space. So now when you go into that space and they have a conversation with you, now you're setting a boundary. Girl, we used to always come to your house. Yo, man, I used to always call you at 3 o'clock in the morning to say I was with you when I was out with some other chicks. I can't do that no more, man. I'm apologizing to myself. I can't do that no more. I can't keep doing that shit. Sorry. I apologize. I'm taking accountability for my energy right now. Because you open up a new dialogue with yourself. Now you put yourself into that state of priority. Instead of everybody else being, oh my God, my life's supposed to be something else. You put yourself in that own state of priority for yourself. Because that's the learning process. But it's a process. Purpose is the ability to learn to contrast and comprehend. It is okay that you have that feeling. But it's time, instead of trying to compare, everybody else seems to be happy and I'm not happy, it's time to take a state of contrast and be like, okay, cool. What I see is happiness. Why do I feel that way? Let me put this into my state of contrast. Anything's better than this. Go down that line of that dialogue. Purpose is based on comprehension and contrast. Let me comprehend let me come into a state of comprehension of my emotions. Let me come into a state of comprehension with my emotions, my feelings, my thoughts. Let me get out of the context. Let me sit with that space and let me sit with that thought. Let me sit with that new thought real quick. Let me sit with this. Let me take away. It needs to happen real quick. It needs to be instantaneous. Oh my God, I felt the feeling. Because 90% of your feelings that you feel in infatuation, you're not used to that shit even cycling. You're not even used to cycling. See, your purpose is going to be based on cultivating a new technique for yourself. The gradual growth. It's not going to be based on, I got it, let me run with it. It's going to be required on, okay, I have it. I believe that I have this. I know that I have this. I can feel it. I can taste it. I can touch it. Let me sit with it. Let me plant this. This is to be planted. This is to be planted and this is to be planted and nurtured. Let me nurture this. Let me nurture this feeling. Let me build my disciplines around it. Okay, cool. Do my disciplines match this? All right, cool. I've been going to the gym. I've been doing my workouts. I've been doing my meditations. I've been doing my yoga. I've been doing my journaling. Been doing my petitions. I've been eating. I've been more conscious of what I'm bringing in my body, not just on the aspects of food. I'm allowing myself to actually feel the emotion instead of running away from it the moment that it comes up. Okay, cool. Now I can develop and open up in my purpose. See, predestination to have you stuck in a state of, well, I did this back when I was little, and I thought that was the only way that I needed to live my life, but now I don't know where my life is at. See, the hardest thing when it comes into building out your space after that initial healing process is that everything is going to change. Everything required, because now once I started taking accountability for myself, it was improbable for me not to take accountability. Because I noticed, because now I built a new space. In the spaces where I was taking accountability, I noticed some new shit started popping off there. In the places where I wasn't taking accountability, the populating was getting more constricted. It was more restricted in that sense. It was more compromised. I noticed that my eating habits would change, as opposed to in the space where I was sitting in spaces of accountability, as opposed to the space where ain't nobody taking accountability. It's everybody else's fault. It's their fault that we did this. It's their fault that we here. I stopped going into those spaces. I stopped going into that comparison. I stopped going into that competition. And I started to develop a sense of contrast, and a sense of comprehension. That's when I was able to develop my my newfound respect for things. That's when I was able to develop the actual space of compassion. And then that delivered me into my purpose. But everything that was going on, I noticed one main key thing. I was always living inside of my purpose. It was just offset by my traumatic experiences. Instead of me saying like, oh my God, my life could have been like this 3 years ago. I stopped doing that shit. La 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 la. I don't know what that means. Go away. But yeah. 1 second. Mm-hmm. Yes. 1 second. Oh my goodness. We're back. Their state of self-awareness for yourself. Self-awareness, self-accountability is very important, yes, in developing the contrast, developing the need for contrast. When we're stuck in a state of comparison, you can't develop that. You can't develop a truce. You can't develop a space because you're always stuck in this happened here. This is what I'm stuck on. As long as it doesn't happen as long as it don't happen like that again, I can deal with it. So now I'm competing with myself to make sure it doesn't happen like that again. When I develop you develop that self-awareness with oneself, now you develop the contrast. The contrast becomes, okay, 3 years ago, I was drinking, smoking, partying, self-medicating, and things of that nature. I'm now in year 3, and I still have the feelings. The feelings are now starting to come to the surface of what I was masking when I was smoking, drinking, and partying, doing all this stuff, self-medicating. Now I'm inside of this space. Okay, cool. I'm at this point. I'm proud of myself for being at this point. Let me deal with this inside of this space. I'm going to deal with this, these emotions, these thoughts. Now, as you keep going forward in that contrast, you can notate and mark your growth. See, when you're stuck in a state of comparison, it's like, ooh, that person's happy. That person's happy. I want to be like them. But if you came in early when I said that aspect, the version of you that wants to be in that happy relationship is healed. That's the thing that you're not answering. I love the smell of my hair. That person, the owner of that space is not renting their emotions. Simple analogy. You want to be a homeowner. The version of you that's the homeowner is an owner. Not just in the aspects of having the money, having the job, things of that nature. The person that's the owner of that house, their credit's in order. Their credit is in order. They got their credit in order. They have research. They have done the research for the people that they need to start talking to and dealing with in that space. They've done the work and they started saving, and they didn't just start saving money and putting up money. They developed a system, standard, structure, and stability of saving. They actually they understand, use for the example, they have the 50-40-10 rule in effect. 50% of their income, or what the money that comes in, goes into their house, the stuff that their rent, their electric bill, their water, their internet, their internet, Wi-Fi, gas, car note, insurance, their basics. And anything outside of that is an expense. Their groceries, gas in the car, stuff for the kids. That's all in that expense of that 50%. They got that 40%, which is their savings and their contingencies, their schooling, things that their investments and their contingencies and their savings. And they only give themselves 10% of that total amount of income. They got 10% that they can use on whatever they want. And in their whatever they want, that's where they're learning to cut off their vices. Whatever has become their vice or their urge. So that 10% is only used for that. If I do not have it in my 10%, I'm not going to do it. They've developed their system around that rule. So they've learned how to use that since they developed an actual system. They didn't just start saving money, and then by the time they save the money, because think about it like this. If you just jumping, you can go get the house. Cool. You go buy the whole house. You ever notice people that buy a house, they always want to talk about they bought their house? Because they're house poor. Talk about people that go get the new car, and all they talk about is their car, because they're house poor. They're car poor. They're apartment poor. They can't do anything else but that house. You ever hear somebody always talk about their relationship and it's so good and it's so great and oh my God, relationship goals all the time? They're relationship poor. They're stuck in that fear-based or that poverty-based lack mindset. They need it to constantly be validated because they can't do nothing else without it. They didn't go through an actual process. They just followed their predisposition, their attitude. They've been angry most of their damn life. They just been angry all their damn life. They haven't grown from anything. They're still doing the same shit that when you met them. They need you to stay inside of that. They need you to stay inside of your insecure space with yourself so they can seem like they're better. The truest aspect of predestination and you being around certain people that are in an unhealed state, that fear-based state, you always need people to be beneath you. You need haters. Yeah, I got my haters. I got my competition. The realest thing about when I stepped into my purpose, I have no competition. I have no competition. If anything, I have multiple positions to learn from. Got multiple shit. I can learn from everything around me. If I can't learn from it, then why is it around me? Boundary. If it doesn't reflect the honor that I put into myself, why is it around me? If it does not reflect the trust that I have for myself, then why is it around me? Maybe this is a lesson. Maybe this is the time for me to actually, maybe in moments where I wasn't being honest and be speaking up, maybe this is a moment for me to speak up. And all them times when I was getting loud and all rah with people, maybe this is the time for me to actually be quiet and just pay attention. Maybe, just maybe. In all them points of time when I was sitting there arguing with everybody, maybe this is time for me to sit back and observe. That's why they keep coming up. I don't need to observe. But yes, before we get out of here, I'm going to do a nice little collective reading. Three things I'm going to say, I'm going to repeat them again. Favorite things to repeat is my mantras. Healing is a destructive process. Healing is a destructive process. It is meant to bring everything to the surface. It's meant to break everything down so we can actually start bringing things to the surface. You are deserving, but you are not entitled. That's coined from faith without works is dead. Faith without works is dead. Faith without works is dead. You are deserving, but you're not entitled. Because of what you went through does not give you a sense of entitlement that you should get something based on because of what you went through something. Because guess what? With entitlement, if I get things based on what I've been through, then the things that I've been through must continue happening. The most underrated reason why you keep getting stuck in certain situations is because every time you go into a space and you say, well, I've never experienced love before. I just want somebody to love me for me. And then you meet a person, they love you for you, but you don't know you. And now you don't know them. You don't know you. So energetically, they don't know themselves. But they've developed the sense of making you be a way. You're going to be whatever way it is for them to love you. And then you get out of the relationship and you're like, oh my God, that person was a narcissist. A narcissist's main job is to reflect everything to you that is the best thing they saw of you. So until you're able to thank them and be like, damn, they showed me the best aspects of myself. They showed me things I didn't see inside of myself. Why am I not sitting there with those? Why am I not sitting there doing that for myself? And that leads into the aspects of the Eight of Wands. The Eight of Wands represents the end, represents a repeating decision. A repeating decision. You're in a repeat. Some of y'all's in a repeating space. You're in a repeating space inside of your shift, inside of your cycle. this loop of making a decision or making that jump. Like, okay, I need to make this move. But if I make this move, what's going to happen in my life? If I make this move, then what's going to happen next? Here's the thing about you worried about what's going to happen next. You only know what's in the now. Everything that you project into the aspects of thinking about the future is always going to be the projection of the same emotions that you're not dealing with. So if I get insecure about moving forward, I'm going to project insecurity forward. So I'm going to create the most insecure perceptions of myself into that space. I'm going to grab from my future to pay off my past and rob my present. That leads into the aspects of the Lover's card. The Lover's card represents the aspects of a decision on multiple levels, relationship. It's time to start looking at the relationship with yourself. What is that relationship or the space that you're in based on a relationship? It does not have to be an external relationship that means collective. We're talking about the individual relationship in that aspect. What decision based on your individual, what decision are you making in the state of your individual relationship that keeps keeping you in the same cycle? What needs to change? What needs to change? That's led into the aspects of the Four of Swords. The Four of Swords is the aspect of allowing yourself to sit and open up into the space. Allow yourself to open up into the space, sitting with those emotions, and that's going to open up and create the natural, it's going to create everything that's necessary for you to sit there. There's things that you need to cut away. There's things that you need to cut away. There's a reason that's coming up, and we coming into this wintertime year. In the wintertime, nothing grows. In the wintertime, nothing grows. And the only things that's meant to grow in the wintertime are things that are meant for the wintertime. A lot of times you keep treating a relationship to grow certain things when that's not what that relationship was meant to grow. That relationship was not meant to grow that. That leads us into the King of Cups. This is that water energy, right? This is that water energy we got on there right there. That water energy. It's time for you to acknowledge it's time to acknowledge what you've been allowing to fill inside of you, what you've been maintaining this old standard. I'm feeling that maintaining that old standard. You've been maintaining this standard and championing this standard that you've been this person for all your life. And I've been hard and I've been... King of Cups represents acknowledging what I've made abundant in my life. See, the thing when it comes to the aspects of abundance, you're abundant and you've been crowning your abundance, but you haven't been owning the aspects of you abundant in. You've been sitting inside of that space and you said, I'm abundant every morning. I'm abundant every morning. What are you abundant in? I'm abundant in all areas of my life. That means the positive and the negative. It looks like the aspects in that next card came off is that Seven of Cups. You are abundant in a state of illusion. You've been selling yourself this illusion. For a while now, you've been selling yourself the illusion that if one more this, or if I get one more time or one more chance, you've been running that cycle ragged. You've been running that cycle of illusion ragged. You're still looking for peace outside of yourself. You're still looking for closure. The realest thing that I've ever sat with in my fucking life. Closure does not exist. Closure does not exist. Closure does not exist. It doesn't do anything. Because after closure, you're going to be like, okay, what's next? How do you capitalize on closure? I needed them to say that to me because why? I needed them to say that to me because I did not say it to myself. Once you realize when you start saying certain things to yourself, you realize you don't need other people to say it to you. When they do say it, they'll say it and you'll be like, okay, cool. You can accept it for where it's at. You can see it for what it is. Because if you have not accepted what you need to say to yourself, anybody can come in and compromise you. That leads into the aspects of that Four of Wands. We got a lot of sit down energy. All the fours, when I pull them, are the aspects of sit down. It's time to sit down. It's time to sit down. You're afraid to sit down with the decision because that pressure that comes from that decision, the pressure of that decision is what is necessary. I'm gonna give you a key. Conflict is natural. Conflict creates the friction that it elevates the growth. Most of the times when you sit there and you're afraid of the conflict, that means you're afraid to have that conversation. You're afraid to have a conversation. You're afraid to face that aspect. That's what's holding you back. You'll sit there, oh my God, my life is... You're holding yourself back in that state because you're afraid to sit inside of that pressure. You're afraid of that pressure to build up because this is what happens. The pressure builds. You confuse it as something happening. You then project your insecurity into what's happening, and it changes the result. It changes the result, and then you're like, oh my God, what happened? It's because you did not allow that energy to fully cycle. See, when we step out of infatuation, we allow that energy to naturally cycle. You allow that energy to naturally cycle. So since that energy naturally goes to a state of cycling, instead of you sitting there like, oh my God, this should have happened 3 months ago. That doesn't happen. What actually happens inside of that space is now you actually allow that energy to cycle. That means you allow yourself to feel it. You allow yourself to feel it. It goes through the 5 points. It goes through these 5 intimate sectors. This is one of the other things I get into with my clients. It goes through the 5 intimate sectors. It goes into my sense of my spiritual presence, my spiritual intimacy. Instead of me going through spiritual, it goes through spiritual intimacy. That means it challenges my belief. It challenges my belief. It helps me reset new beliefs and new standards. It goes through my mental points of intimacy. That means I'm not listening to respond. I'm not listening for stimulation. I'm accepting the substance that's coming up out of that space. That allows me to shift into that emotional aspect. And where's my emotional intelligence at? That allows me to step into that experimental space. Okay, cool, let me try this with myself. And then that creates the physical blueprint. See, when you're stuck inside of that space with yourself and you're following that pressure, Queen of Wands explains it the best. When you're not sitting with that energy in a positive, when you're not sitting with that energy, the Queen of Wands represents nurturing the decision. It represents sitting in that heart. You're used to something else protecting your heart because you're not used to sitting in your own heart space. That heart space is one of the hardest spaces to sit in because you have to remember, in order to sit inside of your heart space, you got to start down here in what we call the root chakra. It don't matter what, man, my throat chakra blocked. You got to start in the root chakra. My heart chakra's blocked. I got to start in the root chakra. I can't see the life that I want to see. Got to start in the root chakra. See, the thing that always comes into the aspects, and I'll pull one more card. The thing that comes into those aspects, this is an opportunity. And I don't use the cards I use the cards to illustrate energy. I don't have to use the cards. Knave of Coins. It's time for you. It's an opportunity to assess. It's an opportunity to assess where you're grounded. You're grounded, or you grounded, or are you tethered? A lot of times we think that we're getting ground. We're looking for grounding. You're looking for something to tether yourself to. You're looking for something to tether yourself to. You're looking for something. I'm gonna tether myself to this for a couple of weeks, couple months, couple years. 4 years go by and you ain't moved forward in no way, shape, or form. It's okay. It's all right. It's okay. Let's set these back here behind me right here like that right now. I have 3 things that I'm going to say one more time before we get subsided here. 1, I appreciate you guys for stopping through. Appreciate y'all for stopping through. Don't let this be the last time that you sit down with me. I'm gonna be honest. I am the most unorthodox therapist that you are ever going to meet. Just gonna say that, to be honest with it. You can hit me in my inbox. You can go to my website. My website links in the bio. You can hit me up in my inbox. We can set up that nice little dialogue, get the dialogue started where you're at with yourself, and then we can go from there. Test the waters with a reading, come through for a reading, come through for the consultation. What I specialize in is shadow work therapy. Shadow work therapy. That's the deepest of the therapy. That's taking therapy and putting it all the way onto the dip. We going in. We go into that space. We go deep into that space for yourself. The 3 things that I give everybody into that space: healing is destructive, you are deserving but you're not entitled, and this level of honesty. Honesty is based upon the comprehension of the need for your transparency and the need for your vulnerability. I have one disclaimer. I have a couple, but I have one disclaimer that I'll put out right now. I can't want it. Nobody can want this, desire this, need this more than you want it for yourself. I am more than willing to sit with you, allow you to open up into that space, cry, snot bubbles, go through that space with you. But you have to be willing. You got to be willing and dedicated to your process. Because I've already been through the process in order to create the space. I've already been through the process to create the standard. I've already been through the process to create the standard, create the structure, create the stability, create the programs. I've already been through it. Still go through it every time that I level up. So, yeah. Website. Links in the bio. Inbox. If I don't, I'm going to put it like this. My inbox is open 24 hours. Inbox is open 24 hours. I am not. If you drop a message in my inbox, if you drop a message in my email, you send me an email, you go to my website, you send me a message in my email, you got questions, I will answer it as soon as I get to it. I can promise you that. But it starts with you. From this point right here, this is your beginning. This is your beginning. Gratitude. Thank you for coming through. This is your beginning. This, at this moment right now, is your beginning. From here, what are you going to do with it? I love you. We love us. Appreciate everybody for coming through. All the love on that. Every Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we going to meet like this again. We going to meet like this for